Welcome back to another edition of the Sick Podcast Recruits Draftcast. I'm your host, producer Shane, joined by the magnificent Grant McCagg. Today, we're going to be delving into Grant's new number one for this year's draft. We're going to get to that in just a moment. We're also going to be talking about busts, but with a twist. You'll want to tune in. We're also going to be delving into our Habs prospect of the week, riser of the week, and as usual, prospect of the week. So let's get started.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Recruits Draftcast.
And with the first overall selection in the 2023 NHL Draft, the Chicago Blackhawks are very proud to select from the Regina Pats, the Western Hockey League, Connor Bedard.
The sickest NHL draft and scouting podcast. It's gonna be sick.
All right. Before we get going, Grant, I got to ask you, feeling any better?
Oh, yeah. Maybe not quite magnificent as you always allude to it, me being,
Too humble.
Yeah. But I feel a lot better for sure. Eyes aren't burning, Hopefully people can watch this one. Not just listen to it.
And that's it. No, I think everybody's kind of catching it or getting off of it. So we're both getting off of it. It's still the Sick Podcast, but we're not as sick. All right. So it should be a little more enjoyable this time around. Grant, you mentioned to me earlier that your draft rankings are going to be updated, right? You got to stay in tune with recruits.ca for that, but you're going to talk about your new number one, right? It was our Silyev, right? We've talked about him a bunch on the show, but somebody has dethroned him. So who might that be?
Well, it's not really new. It's the old. It's a new old number one. I mean, when I put Silyev number one, it was when the NCAA season hadn't started yet. And Silyev had like 5 points in his first 6 KHL games, and he was rocking and rolling, like not just defensively, but offensively. Since then, I don't think he's gotten 5 points, more points. So a little bit of question about just maybe how much offensive upside there is with him, but definitely still a fantastic prospect and in my top 2. But Macklin Celebrini, I mean, just he's been lights out from the start of the season, and catching quite a bit of BU, not only for Macklin, but to keep an eye on Mr. Lane Hudson as well for our Habs followers. And they make quite an awesome tandem. What I've been chatting with a few scouts in addition to what I've been seeing, and the word is that you don't see the name Sidney Crosby tossed out there as far as a comparison for a draft prospect too often, but people are starting to at least whisper that he is that type of he has that type of potential, because he's just he's going to be awesome defensively as well as offensively, and could someday perhaps be a Selke trophy candidate as well as a top 10 point producer. Not many prospects, not many NHL players you can say that about. Sidney Crosby would be one. Just his leadership qualities, his intensity, his smarts, defensive hockey sense are all high level. In addition to, his great skill, his vision, his puck skills, he checks off all the boxes. And because of that, he's for sure number one at this point. And I'd be surprised if he gets supplanted from that again, unless Silyev starts putting up, point per game numbers again, like he did at the start of the season. Then he might get back in the conversation, because You know, poor man's Crosby versus Victor Hedman, that'd be pretty close. So, but at this point, those two have separated themselves for me. Now, Demidov's been injured, so you know, out of sight, out of mind type thing. But he may end up being back ahead of Yzerman as he was at the start of the year for me. Yzerman got off to that blazing start at the start of the year and scoring like, you know, a couple goals a game. Mm-hmm. They had an under-18 tournament, Four Nations Cup last week. And I mean, he got 6 points, but he actually disappointed the fellows that were over there, the crossover scouts that I've talked to since the tournament. Bit of needs to work on his all-around game. Certainly, there's no comparison between him and Celebrini when it comes to all of the different aspects of Celebrini's game. He's a bit of a one-trick pony, as they like to call it, where he's a fantastic shooter and he's going to score goals, but you know, Brett Hull or Sidney Crosby, you know, who would you take on your team if you wanted to win a Stanley Cup playoff game? Well, you go with Crosby. So not that Celebrini's the next Crosby, but he's at least being used in the same breath. And at this point, he separated himself from Yzerman. And so he's the clear-cut North American number one prospect at this time.
Wow. So, I mean, when you're talked about in the same breath as Crosby, that's, you know, that's no small feat right there. That's pretty impressive. Obviously, we're not talking about the next Crosby, but in the similar type of mold, similar type of game, right? Very complete player. So Macklin Celebrini now number one on Grant's list. I think we have a strong feeling he'll stay there for most of the year and probably until the draft. Since, I mean, most everybody who's seen him play agrees with that, eh? He's
dominant at the college level as a freshman already, so he's really impressing everyone.
Yeah, and BU is they're no San Jose Sharks. We'll say it like that, right? They're a weapon of the team, and I mean they obviously got Lane Hudson in the back end, but they've got Lane's brother Quinn, who also scored a hat trick recently. They got, you know, Habs prospect Luke Tuck up front as well. So, anyways, they're a loaded team, and I think it's a good environment for Macklin to play his draft eligible year and, you know, boost his stock clearly because he's not hurting it. So, all right, I've been wanting to touch on this a little bit, and I'm happy that, you know, the players we're going to be talking about are performing well this year. Maybe it's because I'm on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it too much, but these keyboard warriors that, you know, after 20 games of a top 5 pick who's not doing too well, he's a bust. He's a bust. We shouldn't have drafted him. He sucks, you know, and it just bothers the hell out of me. I try to, you know, scroll and whatever, but it sucks because these players are just starting their NHL career. And I don't think people understand just how hard the NHL is, right? It's not like I've played in it and I can tell you, oh, it's at this level, right? But anybody who has played in it says it's just a completely different level. You have the best players from around the world in one league. It's going to be tough, especially when you're 18, you're still developing, right? So we're going to be talking about busts here. Okay. Now, Grant, when I mention the word bust, can you off the top of your head, who are some names that come to
mind? Patrick Stefan, first overall pick, Nail Yakupov, guys that are picked very high who, you know, by about 5-6 years in are no longer in the NHL. Typically it's a European because they end up heading back over and getting a good salary and playing, you know, KHL or what have you. But those are, and I mean, you know, you can talk about maybe a Michael Dalcole, that type of guy where still a top 5 or 6 pick who never really cracks the NHL for whatever reasons. For him, it was skating, I think, more than anything. But I think any player that's a top 10 pick that, you know, isn't a regular NHLer for a decade or more, you can label a bust, I think, just generally speaking.
That's it. It's always, you know, top 5, top 10 pick who, as you mentioned, after 4 to 6 years, still hasn't contributed to the NHL, still hasn't developed into what they were promised to be, is when you can call them a bust. That is a bust.
Unless they're a Habs prospect, and then anyone that's picked in the top first round, if he doesn't become a star, is a bust.
There you go.
Michael McCarron, you know, 25th overall in a crappy draft.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there's thousands of Habs fans that call him a bust because he didn't become a star, even though every player picked between 16 and 40, I think, in that draft, like 90% of them are even in the NHL anymore. Yeah. At least McCarron's still getting an NHL paycheck, you know. Yeah, he's no star, that's for sure, but to label him a bust at 25th overall is that to me doesn't compute. It's the really high picks, because the percentages say 80% plus of them become regular, have a 10-year career or more. Well, if you're in the 20%, that's not good. So it's got to be a top 5, top 10 pick.
Exactly.
That doesn't become a regular NHLer for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay, we've established the term bust. Okay. This is what we'll be analyzing right now. There's 3 players that came to mind, you know, off the bat, and there's probably more. And if you can think of any, put them in the comments, let us know. But there's 3 guys right now that I remember were being called busts every single day, saying, they were picked too high. This guy will never pan out. He sucks, whatever. And I want to start with Alexis Lafrenière, because this one's fresh. Okay. 2020 draft 3 years ago. And sure, he maybe hasn't lived up to the hype of being the first overall pick, but take a look at this season, right? 11 points in 14 games. He's a top 6 guy on a very good New York team, and he's a strong contributor. He plays with Panarin, who's like on a 14-game point streak right now. Very valuable to his team. Now, maybe he wasn't the first overall pick, but in a redraft, he goes top 5 easily. So to me, that's not necessarily a bust. When I'm thinking bust, I'm thinking Patrick Stefan, I'm thinking Nail Yakupov, guys who aren't even in the league anymore. You know what I mean? So 3 years in, we're not even at the 5-year mark, the 5-year golden rule, right? 3 years in, and he's already at 11 points in 14 games, a very valuable player for the New York Rangers this season and moving forward, no doubt, right? And if we stay in that same 2020 class, the guy picked right below him, Quinton Byfield, was also being called a bust because he hadn't yet achieved the NHL level, right? He was hanging around in the AHL, all injuries and all that. Look at him now, 13 points in 14 games. Hello. All right, 3 years in, he's already playing on the first line with Kopitar. He's again a very valuable player for the LA Kings. This is what I mean, right? And then let's take a look at a guy who is on his 5th year. Jesperi Kotkaniemi, all right, 2018 draft, 13 points in 15 games this year, playing on the second line with, I believe, Natchez and Bunting. Anyways, the lines keep changing, but the point is, very valuable player for the Carolina Hurricanes, all right? Players take time to develop. None of these guys are busts. None of them. Okay. No. And if we take it one step further, all right, the one pretty extreme example that a lot of people refer to when talking about busts is Joe Thornton, right? First season, 55 games, 7 points as the first overall pick. Ew, stinky. He's a bust. Oh, yeah? 1,539 points in 1,714 games. First ballot Hall of Famer, one of the best players ever. Yeah.
Well, okay.
Is he a bust?
You want me to? Okay, don't add any more players because you already got about a half hour worth of talk for me here. It's funny to look back at that year. Daniel Tkachuk, spelled a little differently than Brady Tkachuk, but
yeah,
that's how you pronounced it too. He was 6th overall to Calgary that year. There's an example of send him back to junior where he can get his offensive confidence. There's always this talk about offensive confidence. Well, Tkachuk, I think, went back and had like 100 points or something like that, played in the World Juniors. Mm-hmm. While Thornton's struggling at the NHL level, and they, didn't got 1 goal and no assists in his first 31 games and ended up with 8 points in the season. Well, there were people saying, Tkachuk is going to be a better NHLer than, look, he got 100 points in junior. Thornton only got 8 points. And that's not how it works. Like, you don't, there's no chart that says, well, 100-point scorer in junior after he was drafted means that you had to score 40 at the NHL level to be equal. It's irrelevant. Everyone has a different development curve. But Jumbo Joe ended up with, I think, 1,500 more points than Tkachuk in his career. So, it just, there's the prime example right there where, sending them down to a lower league to get offensive confidence, which we've been hearing about Slafkovsky all year. Typically a kid who's in the NHL that young gets sent down to the minors like Joshua Waugh or whoever you may, bring up. It's because they need to develop their defensive game. They're all around game. They're two-way game. Maybe work on their speed a bit, stuff like that. Well, as we've seen in the last few games with Slafkovsky as a example, he's pretty good already defensively. Like he doesn't have to go down to work on his defensive game. There's no better place to develop your offensive game if you're already good enough away from the puck than the NHL. That's where you become better. Like you're shooting on NHL goalies, you're going around NHL defensemen, you're trying to get away from NHL forwards, you're trying to skate at that level. There's not a better place to develop your offensive game than at the NHL level. So typically it's, if the kid's ready to help your team and contribute, not necessarily getting points, they'll play him in the NHL now and let him learn, because it's the hardest league in the world. It's tough. Not everyone steps in and scores a point a game. I mean, it's very rare. Patrick Laine and Matthews were 2 examples of kids that came in and were very productive right away, but they're the exception, not the rule.
Outliers, yeah.
Now, I don't know that. I think you would still have to say that Lafrenière to this point in his career has been a disappointment.
Of course.
Now, bust, no, because it's 3 and a bit years in, and you wait. But he joined a Rangers team that's been competitive the last 3 years, that had guys in their top 6 that were playing better. So he was typically put on the third line with Keitel and Kako, kids that are also still trying to, break into a top 9 on a good team. So a lot of times it's opportunity and ice time are big factors. And it's one of the reasons why Lafrenière I mean, most of us thought that he would step into a top 6 role in the NHL, even with a team as good as New York. And I think he's had to work on his speed and his conditioning, and he's starting to figure all that out. And sometimes it takes a kid, maybe he didn't have a great off season his first year or two, and light bulb's gone off, and he's figuring that out. Because he wasn't the fastest guy in the world, even in his draft year. A little heavy set, and he's probably had to build some lean muscle up. And the impressive thing for me is the 7 goals, more so than the 11 points, right? He's on pace for 40. So if he can come anywhere close to that, look at his age, 22, 23, 40 goal scorer. Yeah, the bust label will be gone forever at that point. And similarly with Byfield, where didn't necessarily. I mean, a lot of us thought it at the time, and it's become it's come to fruition, the fact that Byfield better suited to be a winger at the NHL level. Just it didn't seem like that was the ideal, especially if you wanted him to become productive at the NHL level. Putting him, and again, it's opportunity. You put him with one of the best centers in the NHL of the past 15 years in Kopitar, and give him first line minutes and big minutes. Well, odds are that he was going to start producing. Yeah. I mean, to get back to Slafkovsky again, 6 games he's played with either Caulfield, Doc, or Caulfield or Doc, and in those 6 games, there were his best 6 games of the year. The other games that he played with Newhook and Anderson, and Newhook as his center, he struggled. Well, is that all on Slafkovsky? No. It has to do with line mates, with opportunity, and building his confidence. So both Byfield playing with Kopitar and Lafrenière getting to play with Panarin, I mean, it's not a surprise that they're starting to find their production at the NHL level. And it goes in tune with them being ready to do that. So you have to be patient with them. People aren't. And they're just two great examples of why you don't rush to judge. I think one of the big reasons why they've been labeled as busts by a lot of people is it's usually because somebody else from the draft class that was picked after them ends up being better. That doesn't mean that they're busts.
No, exactly.
That guy's better. Stützle, like I'd still take Stützle over those two if we did the draft again. And I'd probably take Sanderson ahead of them too at this point. But it certainly wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that you took Lafrenière or Byfield instead. Like they're at least in the conversation. 2 years ago, no. Where last year, no, you would have said those two guys for sure. But Stützle's was a top 3 pick, so it's not like he was a 4th rounder that's developing into a superstar. He was, I know NHL teams that had him top 2. A lot of scouts did, so it's not a surprise. I mean, I had both Stützle and Sanderson ahead of Byfield. That wasn't the consensus by any means with independent scouts. That's for sure. It was the opposite. But so I haven't been surprised by it. But at the same time, I've never labeled Byfield as a bust or Lafrenière because I've been around the game too long to know that the 5-year rule, it applies always. And we've seen it with KK. This is actually year 6 for KK.
Yeah, that's it. He's getting into year 6.
But, you look at it after 5 years, and it's not always just 5 years, and you say, well, did he produce what we expect in his 5th year? But you look at it and was KK making progress? Certainly. I mean, the second half of last year, he was 30. I think he had at least 30 points in the second half of last season. I mean, that double of what he was scoring at Montreal when he left. And this year so far, he's taking another step offensively. And again, given Jordan Stahl, a heck of a centerman, Aho, he wasn't going to play again ahead of those guys when he first came to Carolina, especially Aho. So he got third and fourth line when he first came to Carolina. Still a young guy, still adapting to the NHL. Well, now he's in that top 6, which you bounce him, juggle him around any way you like. He's got good line mates now.
Yeah.
Well, and a little more offensive opportunity. It's no surprise to me. I anyone that's followed me on Twitter for the last 5 years knows that I preached patience with KK and backed him the whole time that he was getting vilified when he was with the Canadians. That especially a big gangly European that has to adapt to the North American game, that can take look at Joel Erikson Ek. He's an even better example. Took him 7 years really to become as productive as he is now. Joel Erikson Ek is a hell of a NHL center now. All around, he's poor man's Kopitar, big kid that can that can play two-way game, that can chip in at least 60 points for you. But it took him 7 years to finally reach that level of offensive confidence that he has now. And Minnesota's got a great one. So yeah, it's patience. Wait 5 years for these kids to develop. And if if they're like Tkachuk, Brady Tkachuk or Stützle, and they reach that before, that's fine. But don't compare. There's more than one great player in each draft class typically, and sometimes some guys are great sooner than others, but it doesn't mean that the kid that takes longer is a bust if he doesn't produce in his first few years.
Bingo. And, I think this is a fantastic segue to our Habs prospect of the week, who happens to be Philip Mesar, who has gotten way too much flack, okay? Just because Jiri Kulich was drafted after him. Like you mentioned, Grant, I don't know what to call it, this sort of bias where a player drafted after, like, what was he, like 1 or 2 ranks after? It's the same range, essentially, right? It's just a few picks different. He's really doing well in the AHL, but, what about Philip Mesar? And look at that, Habs prospect of the week. What's he done so far?
Oh, he's been lights out since he came back to junior this year. You can see by these clips, his skating, his vision, his shot, playmaking. He's an elite playmaker. He's probably I wouldn't be surprised if he got 50 assists in the OHL this year, depending, I guess, how many games he misses. But and he's playing with Rakoff, right? Who's broken out. So Rakoff's leading the OHL in goals. Big reason is Mesar. He's setting them up. But we've seen his shot a couple of times here where he always had the shot, but he's more of a playmaker, as you can see in those highlights there.
Mm-hmm.
But drives the play more so than most wingers do at the junior level. Often the guy bringing the puck into the zone, and he could play center too. Like, he can play either. So it took him 2 years, or like a year and a bit, to fully adapt to the North American game at the junior level. And I'm glad he got sent back down.
Yeah.
I mean, Kitchener added Roman Schmidt last week on defense. They're leading. They're right at the top of the standings in the Western Conference in the OHL. They could go on a really long playoff run. And then Mesar as well is going to play for a Slovakian team that's going to be very competitive at the World Juniors too.
That's it. So
he's in the right spot. I think he's going to have a lot of confidence going into next year as a first year AHL pro, and be a regular next year on Laval. That wasn't going to be the case this year, and I'm glad that they, instead of giving him the Mishak treatment like Mishak got last year, sent him back to junior on a good team, good coaching, good organization. Let him get more adapted to the North American game, find his offensive confidence before turning pro. And he'll, add one more off season, getting stronger, quicker, working on his body to get ready for the AHL next season.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe, if he keeps improving at the pace he has in the last, since the end of last season, maybe he even pushes for an NHL spot next year.
There you go. I've gotten the chance to meet Philip in person. Great kid, great attitude, really nice guy. And we are the same height. I'm 5'10", by the way. So it was pretty interesting, but he is slightly bigger though. I'll give him that. He's a thick boy. All right, Riser. What's that?
Yeah. Geez, I hope so, because I saw you in person too. And
no, that's it. No, I'm about 170, so he's definitely bigger than me. But no, listen, he's no. I was gonna say the M word, but anyways, he's no gnome. We'll say that. All right. People can say he's undersized. Not that much. All right. He's still like 5'10". It's a fine height. Anyways, I really like Philip Mesar. I wish him nothing but success in the OHL and in the World Juniors next month, by the way, month. So this channel is going to be popping off. All right. Better be ready.
It's interesting that, they got rid of a European there, Hamara, who's a Senators draft pick. When they brought Schmidt back, he requested a trade, but they only have the 1 Euro, which is Mesar. Keep an eye on the Pobazal. I imagine he'll be playing for Slovakia at the World Juniors. He's an underage, so he's not eligible for the draft till next year. But Kitchener picked him in the import draft, and I have a feeling. I reached out to Bob McKenzie, who would know, seeing that his son Mike is the GM, and and just ran it by him, say, geez, they got an import spot there, Euro, might they lure Pobazal over? And of course, he doesn't know one way or the other, but didn't discount that they'll at least try, and you see a lot of them come over right after the World Juniors, right?
Yeah.
So they had that other, another really skilled. Pobazal played one junior game in Slovakia this year and got 5 points. and then called him up to the Slovakian league, So he's playing against men, underage guy. So there's a lot of potential there. And it'd be kind of cool if he came over, had the two Slovaks on Kitchener and make them only stronger. And
yeah.
And then typically they're at the top of the standings. They'll trade for a couple of more guys, maybe Owen Beck, Peterborough is actually in first place, and we had a chat with Mike Oakes. So
that's it.
I could see Beck staying there, but who knows? Cedric Gandon, maybe he gets picked up by them. And there's a couple of have prospects on Kitchener, but they could be a Memorial Cup contender this year, and that would be only beneficial for Mesar and his development.
Yeah. Good stuff from the Rangers. Okay, Riser of the Week. Again, another great name, Grant. You're on a roll here. Teddy Stiga. I like that. What's he done?
Yeah, he played in the Four Nations under 18 tournament last week, and wasn't really on my radar going into the tournament. I haven't seen a lot. This is really the first. I don't typically put a lot of stock into the start of the year on the U.S. development team playing against USHL teams and college teams, but this Stiga kid, he played on the top line with Hagens and Zemer and had 6 points in the tournament. And not the biggest kid in the world, but as you can see in these highlights, he's slippery. He's got really good edges, good skater, quick, and got very good offensive instincts. So the fact there, nice rebound goal. The fact that he, wasn't really, like, when I'm talking to scouts that have been seeing them, hadn't really been mentioning him. And then for him to be on the top line at that tournament and then to produce and to score skilled goals like he did in that tournament, he's climbed, and he's going to be on my I'm going to be updating my rankings this week, and Stiga is going to jump into the rankings, and because of that, we're calling him the Riser of the Week.
Love it. Cool name and cool player. Very nice. Okay, Prospect of the Week. Now, this is another name that might raise some eyebrows. Alexander Zetterberg. And I already know what kind of questions you're asking when you're watching this. Yes, he is a distant relative of Henrik Zetterberg. I don't know that he'll be the same type of player, but one thing's for sure, he is the Prospect of the Week.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean that, they stand out as great NHL draft prospects. They just had a great week, I mean, look at that goal. The kid's got skill. Now, what it may keep him out of the first round is, like, look at the size of him. He's 5'9", maybe 5'10". Offensive, one-way kind of player, winger, but he may not be on, in the first round on a lot of draft lists for NHL scouts, but kid's skilled. Kid had a hell of a tournament. He scored 2 goals in every game in the 3 games at the tournament, and all types, as you can see by these highlights. And this is back in junior, where he picked up an assist as well. But consistently producing. He 2 goals in the 3 games that he played at the Four Nations Cup, and picked up an assist as well. 7 points. Give him the nod as the Prospect of the Week, because a lot of crossover scouts at the tournament, and sure, the guys that I talked to aren't over the top about him, predominantly because of his size, but you can be sure that there were scouts at that tournament who were pretty impressed. I mean, you saw by the highlights, the kids got NHL skill level. Now, does it translate to the NHL game? That'll be up for we get the rest of the year to try to figure that out. But certainly he's a top 50 guy. I've got him in my top 40. Now, whether he cracks the first round or not remains to be seen. But if he keeps, the next U18 tournament, if he does the same thing again, and then at the U18s at the end of the year, if he, which will be the best tournament, which will have Canada and everyone will be setting their best to that tournament, then you never know. He might end up sneaking into the first round on some draft lists, despite the limitations with his size. Unfortunately, he's a little undersized, but the kids, you can't knock his skill, and you can't knock what he did at the U18 tournament. So we give him the nod for the prospect of the week.
And well-deserved. Alex Zetterberg, Recruits Draftcast prospect of the week. That about wraps it up for us. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, supporting. If you can leave a like, that'd be awesome. As always, leave us a comment, right? We asked you if there's a bust that you thought about that turned out to not be a bust. Let us know. We definitely missed some names. There are a lot. So we thank you all for watching. As always, go check out recruits.ca. Grant's coming out with his updated rankings, right? We know number 1 is going to be Macklin Celebrini, but we don't know the rest. So keep an eye on that. And, the World Junior coming up. So next month, we're going to be rocking on this channel. We're going to be covering it all, and we're going to be having a lot of fun. So we hope that you can tune in as well.
That wraps it up, folks. Goodbye.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast, Recruits Draftcast on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.